This is Newstalk KGVO 1290 AM and 101.5 FM with the Last Best Beer Show and our host, Ryan Newhouse.
Thank you, Shireen. Welcome, everyone, to this week's episode of the Last Best Beer Show. We talk about everything that's good, bad, and indifferent when it comes to beer. I love it. It's one of the best darned drinks in the world. And I'm reminded of one of my favorite quotes by John Wayne. He said, "I'll have bacon for breakfast, bacon for lunch, and I'll drink my dinner."
Amen.
Yeah, I love it. So that just probably put some hair in my chest by saying that. There's a lot going on around Missoula, around Montana that we'll get into in today's show. First off, I want to talk about what's happening at Imagination Brewing Company this Saturday on November 14th. So it's the Hardin Scott Band. They're going to play an eclectic mix of originals and covers. It's a new band for Imagination. They are celebrating the release of their Folly CD, and they will be joined at the brewery also by John Quackenbush, who is a steel guitar player. So it's a great opportunity to get some beer and some music and some good times going on as well. I want to take a moment to talk about all of our sponsors that have made this show possible, and I appreciate them. Imagination Brewing Company and Draftworks Brewery, Bayern Brewing Company, Dram Shop on Front Street, and the University of Montana Missoula Online Brews Course. And if you're ready to get some beer on the go, Warden's Market and Deli on Higgins. They make this show possible. So next time you're in any one of these locations, let them know that you appreciate the support of the Last Best Beer Show. This week on the Last Best Beer Show, I am very excited to welcome Jared Pietzmeyer. He is the Wine and Beer Director for Cafe Dolce. You'll find Cafe Dolce at 500 Brook Street. Jared, thanks for coming in today.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
I love to talk about beer with you guys. You guys have been long partners with me with Missoula Craft Beer Week, and this anytime that I come in for a dinner, and you've got a great tap selection, but you also have a great bottle selection. I guess I'll start off by asking, what is your general philosophy for bringing in really good beers and offering them to people?
So it's a philosophy that's multifold and has many different layers. First and foremost, we try to bring in as many sort of traditional styles that we can from around the world. So we want to have, British beer, we want to have German beer, we want to have Belgian beer, kind of all in the traditional styles that people maybe have heard of or haven't heard of. And then from there, we kind of want to branch out and bring in maybe things that people haven't tried before. Price is really important to us, so trying to make these beers accessible for people, beers that people maybe don't buy at the grocery store or haven't seen before. So we try to keep our prices pretty low so that they're accessible. And then a list that is both exciting to our customers and exciting and challenging to our staff in a way that enables us to really pair these beers with the food that we serve and create a moving and dynamic list that changes weekly, primarily focused on beers of the old world, and then some on local and regional beers, and specifically the ones that people don't see all over town. So we focus on beers from Billings or from Idaho in the region, but maybe lesser known breweries.
I've noticed it sounds like what I'm hearing is you take a beer first approach. Maybe you're not necessarily tied to a specific brewery or region, but you're thinking about the beer. You're going to think about how it can be served, how it can be paired, how it can be presented and enjoyed. But you really want to offer almost any opportunity out there as far as it comes to beer. Is that kind of right?
That's correct. Yeah, we love beer at the cafe. All of our servers do, and we're looking for those beers that have character, those beers that move us, just like we look for wines that challenge us and enable us to experience something new. We look for that same kind of experience in beer while still offering some of the things that people are used to.
One of the things I like that you have an updated beer list, like you said, every week, and I'm seeing bottles that are smaller format, 12-ounce bottles or 375 milliliters, but I'm also seeing the big wine bottle size, 750 milliliters of big beer. I mean, 10, 12%. Now, obviously, that's not for just a single serving, but I like that community aspect, right? That you even offer that it can be a community bottle of beer. And have you had a lot of success with some of those bigger bottles?
We have, actually, and it's really kind of been our success as a wine venue that has sort of enabled us to have that success with beer and sort of getting tables into the notion of sharing a larger bottle of beer and as they would wine. And you're paying a lot less for some of these high quality beers. Some of the best beers in the world are a lot cheaper than wine is. And so with that, and then with our servers' ability to pair those with food and kind of create that atmosphere at the table, we've really had success with some of those larger formats.
This might be a loaded question, but since you deal with beer and wine equally, I'm just curious from a beer standpoint. It sounds like maybe you're not always getting what you pay for, in the sense like just because it's expensive, it's really good. And maybe I'm under the false pretense that that's what happens with wine. Oh, if I'm going to pay this much money for a bottle of wine, it's going to be mind blowing. I don't know. What's your experience with price in wine and price versus beer, and what that quality means?
There seems to be a sweet spot in wine, at least in terms of what we serve, in terms of price to quality. And that tends to be on our list, bottles that range from about $35 to $85. And all of those wines in there are some of the best wines in the world.
Okay.
Now, we do have wine that is more expensive than that, and a lot of that you're paying for limited availability, and there are certainly some that are going to be mind-blowing at that price. With beer, you can get into some of the best beers in the world for really the same price that you can get into some of the worst beers in the world.
That's true.
Yeah. And so it's really cool to be able to serve, these types of things for what is a similar or maybe slightly, increased price over what people are used to paying for a beer in a restaurant.
Right.
And, with our economics at Missoula, we're able to offer these beers at prices that are far less than you're going to see in most cities, which is really wonderful.
Indeed. And I see what I would term as even common beers on your list as well. And I appreciate that it's not, doesn't always have to be something far out or special or exotic. Like you can just get a bottle of beer that you would find anywhere at Warden's and Orange Street and those places. Let's talk about what you have on tap and how you rotate through those. And how many tap handles do you have there?
We just have 6, unfortunately.
6?
I wish we had more, but
sure.
that limitation actually kind of makes it fun.
And maybe I'm seeing a lot of locals. I'm seeing Montana beers. Do you have any approach? How do you designate those 6 precious tap handles to beer?
Everything we do at Cafe Dolce is pretty organic. I do with the taps try to have kind of 2 or 3 things that are always there. One of which is I always try to have a Montana beer. Sometimes I don't, but in general we have 1 or 2 Montana beers. And then I try to have a nice arc of flavor. So usually something very light on one end, something very dark on the other end, and or a bigger beer, a higher alcohol beer, and then a few things in between. And then generally we try to have a sour as well. We're big sour fans, and when pairing beer and food, sour is a wonderful accompaniment to that. So there's usually a sour or a barrel-aged beer on as well.
I appreciate that. I always look for those, and I am a sort of drink local first, but not afraid of any beer to have. When you're serving these beers, and it's something that I wish even more people would do, more retailers or servers, you really pay attention to what glass you put beer in, right?
We do, yeah. Glass. The vessel that a beverage is served in is almost as important as the beverage. Many of these beers, even our local beers, and of course some of these world-class beers, they're really, really ameliorated by the glass that they're in. And you can do it at home. You can try a beer out of one type of glass and try it out of another type of glass, and you'll get a completely different experience. So we try to match the beer type with the glass type that most really showcases the aroma of the beer, as well as the taste. And it really makes a big difference when you're tasting these beers. And without that, I think sometimes you lose some of the nuance of these quality things. We do the same thing with wine as well. And I think bringing kind of that sense of, importance to the vessel with beer comes out of our wine philosophy, but it seems that our customers are responding well to that as well. And it just, when you have a special glass for a special beer, it feels cool in your hand, and it really just creates the experience.
That's true. I know I can go into Cafe Dolce anytime and order a drink and be able to talk about that beer and why you have it and why it's in that glass with anyone who works there. And I think that you've always had a high priority on educating your staff. And I don't know, how do you do that, and why do you do that? And why is it important to you guys?
So we have a very large bottled beer list, much of which people have not heard of or have not tried. And so it's important, both with beer as well as with our wine, that we have a great knowledge of that. I spend much of my job is educating the staff. And so I teach a class every week wherein we taste wine and or beer. We talk about styles, we talk about generalities of style, and then we just talk about flavor. We also focus that on pairing, because that's what we do. We're a restaurant. And so the time that we invest in education with our staff it comes back to us tenfold in terms of customer satisfaction. We kind of have a cool philosophy, which is we, of course, have food-based pairing, but we spend a lot of time talking about mood-based pairing.
Mood-based. I've not heard that before.
Yeah, it's something I came up with a few years ago and kind of intuitively and have been doing for a long time. And that is, someone comes in and they'll say, I want a beer or I want a wine. And we kind of investigate with those people, what's their mood? Did you just get off work? Are you stressed? Are you relaxed? Do you want to get relaxed? Do you need just one beer because you're studying? What's that kind of perfect beer for what mood you're in and maybe what time period of your life you're in? And it's pretty fun to kind of approach beer that way, and that makes it fun for our staff as well.
You can change your title to wine and beer psychologist now.
Maybe so,
director. Yeah, that's awesome.
Get that as
if you get mood rings for customers to bring in, then definitely I'm there, and I'll test it out for you.
We might start working on that.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, all right. Remember that you heard it here at the Last Best Beer Show first. Awesome. Jared, you've got your beer menu list here with you. Why don't you tell our listeners, recommend a few for them to come in and try?
A couple of the things that I'm really into right now are like I mentioned earlier, sours and heritage styles. So
heritage style, can you explain that?
Yeah, these are, and I don't know that this is a proper term. It's something that we kind of use on our list, and to describe styles that maybe were popular in the past and sort of stopped being brewed in mass across the country, or were not brewed a lot, but are now kind of making a comeback. So sours and wilds and Gersa, these are styles that maybe were popular in Europe, kind of fell out of tradition in America. Kolsch is another one that's making a great comeback, and so kind of paying homage to these beers by putting a lot of them on our list and showing people what beer used to taste like. And many of them are phenomenal food beers. So we have a section on our menu which is sours, lambics, and heritage styles. And if you talk to any of our servers about those, we get pretty excited because those are really what we're into. And to some degree with that is just old school styles like a regular British pale ale. It's a wonderful, wonderful food beer, and something maybe that with the popularity of IPA, I think people have sort of relinquished is those very simple British and German styles that can just be wonderful.
Excellent. Those are great recommendations. And I'm joined this week by Jared Pietzmeyer from Cafe Dolce. Stick around after the commercial break. We'll come back. We'll talk to Jared some more, and specifically about pairing beer and food and some of the events that he's done with me and Missoula Craft Beer Week over the years. So stay tuned. Hear a word from our sponsors, and we'll be right back.
And we're back. It's the Last Best Beer Show, Newstalk KGVO, with our host, Ryan Newhouse.
Every week, I'd like to put together a little bit of a list of what's happening nationally with beer news. But this week, we've got so much going on in Montana that we can devote it all to our state. So going on right now, and you can continue to vote until November 15th. But there are 10 Montana breweries out of the 62 that we have in the state that are vying to be America's best beer of Montana. So it's a competition. There's no big prize going on right now. There's no fame or glory really, but there's a competition. It's by a Denver-based beer promoter, and the website is americasbestbeer.org, and you will find it at the Last Best Beer Show Facebook page. They've analyzed over 800 breweries to come up with a short list. Now, there's just over 4,000 breweries nationwide, so they picked just under 25% of those. They came up with a list, and they listed ones for Montana only. So in that are vying, and it's a vote-based award. So anyone can get on there and vote for their favorite Montana brewery. But in the running are Missoula's own Kettle House Brewing, Big Sky Brewing Company, Draftworks in Missoula here as well, and Tamarack Brewing Company in Lakeside, Blackfoot River Brewing and Lewis and Clark Brewing, both out of Helena, Great Northern Brewing Company in Whitefish, and Bozeman Brewing, where else but in Bozeman. So get on there, click on your favorite, and let's see which Montana brewery takes the beer. A new venture that just came across our desk is something called Tap and Cork. So go to Tap and Cork, and that's spelled out AND tapandcork.com. You'll find the link on our Facebook page. This is a new venture out of Bozeman, where they are providing a solution, mobile and web-based solution, that will essentially provide beer lists and menus available to people. Now, I'm assuming that this is an app that you download. It looks like it's available for Android and Apple phones. So you can pull up this app. You can find out exactly what's on tap at that moment at breweries and restaurants. So I'm very excited to learn more about that, and perhaps we'll get those fellas in one week and have them talk about it. So that's what's going on in Montana. Stay tuned. We're going to talk about a little bit of beer and food. Every week on the Last Best Beer Show, I love to designate a little bit of time each week to talk about beer and food. So I've been joined this week by Jared Pietzmeyer at Cafe Dolce. And if you want beer, food, wine, all in the same place at the same time, alone or with your friends, you got to go to Cafe Dolce at 500 Brooks. So, Jared, you and I have worked together on some fun projects, specifically Missoula Craft Beer Week, which happens usually at the end of April, early May. And we've been doing this. It'll come up on our 5th year. But every year you've been with us and you've put on some incredible beer and food events. So last year specifically, you did a beer versus wine dinner, or How I Learned to Stop Choosing and Love Them Both. I love that subtitle. Can you talk about the events that you've done with us, starting with that for Missoula Craft Beer Week?
Yeah, absolutely. The beer versus wine dinner was especially fun for us because it really joined those kind of two pillars of our restaurant, beer and wine. And our entire staff, myself included, we all love wine and beer. And so it was really cool to sort of let the public kind of in on that side of our restaurant, and just give a venue to the notion that you can go out to a nice dinner and you can have beer or you can have wine. And in that specific setting, we were able to see wherein sometimes beer was better and sometimes wine was better. And by and large, both were awesome. But it was cool to sort of open up that lens to the notion that beer can have a place at a nice dinner.
So at this event, I assume you had a dish or a multi-course meal, and then with each serving or each course brought out, you had a wine and a beer, and you had people try each one with that and see what worked, what didn't. You had comparative pairings and contrastive pairings.
Yep.
That's something that you've taught me about, where sometimes a beer or a flavor will complement something, and then at other times you want something that will contrast what you're eating. So
Absolutely.
was that the format of this type of event?
Yeah, it was. We brought out a dish. We brought out a beer and a wine that my beer director at the time, she paired a beer with it, and then I paired a wine with it. And we literally did try to make the best pairing. Some of those were what we thought they were, and then some of them came out and it was different. And people's reaction was different. With modern fare, although we're a Mediterranean themed restaurant, with modern fare you have such an availability of ingredients that are basically a fusion. So one small spice in a dish that may go well with beer, if you change that spice, it now may become a wine favorite dish.
Fascinating.
And you never really know until you're actually there trying it and judging it on its own merits. And that's something that I've taught the staff over the years, and that I've learned myself over the years, is that you can read in a book what a classic pairing may be, but until you're actually drinking that beer with that dish, depending on the nuances of how it's prepared, the pairing may be vastly different than what you read about. So that's what was really fun with that dinner.
And going back to something earlier you said in the show, perhaps it could even be changed by one's mood. And I've had that experience drinking with friends or doing beer tastings, or come back to a beer that I may not have liked the first time, but I love it this time, or vice versa. And I think that our social settings really do play a factor in that.
Absolutely. We oftentimes, of course, recommend beers to go with certain moods and certain settings, but we oftentimes, kind of dissuade people from ordering certain things because it doesn't make sense either with their meal or sort of with the way their meal's going. And it really is important, I think, to pick the proper. I guess it's not totally important, but it's interesting to pick the proper beer to go with those settings.
Sure, it will only enhance the experience.
Absolutely.
I remember the year before, so 2014's Missoula Craft Beer Week, and I got to attend. I believe it was the 5 different tastes that one has, and then you did a beer tasting dinner with 5 different tastes. And that was just a fascinating part. But I guess I want to use that just to say, we always look forward to what you do for Missoula Craft Beer Week, but let's just make it a more broad discussion now about beer and food. So someone's coming in and they're not exactly sure what they want to order food-wise or beer-wise. How do you sort of help someone like that, a patron, to come in and make some decisions?
First and foremost, it goes back to what we were talking about earlier, and that's the education of the staff. So each and every one of our servers is empowered and kind of has the ability to wade through our list, to use that term, because it is very large. But I put sort of the responsibility on each server to be able to kind of lead a table through a meal and lead a table through their dinner. And so sort of assessing kind of what that table is looking for, and then depending on how that's going, getting challenging the table as well.
Okay.
And the fact that our servers do know so much about these things, I think puts a lot of credibility in their hands, but also makes customers feel comfortable. We also are extremely open, especially with our tap beers, to allowing people to try anything they want. And then oftentimes when somebody does order something that we feel like will go well with a beer that they did not order, we'll actually bring some of that beer out complimentarily, just so they can taste it and see what we're talking about, and kind of get them into the fold of beer and wine pairing. It's again, it's kind of an organic process, and there's no way to say, like, here's someone you're going to sort of push this way, or here's someone that you're going to try to convince to buy this certain beer. But it's really all about kind of reading the customer and then trying to figure out where you can kind of challenge them as well.
Sure. Well, as a customer and frequent patron, I know I'm in good hands, and I know I can just ask questions, and I appreciate that. You know what you have, either new or in stock, and what may happen. So when you guys are sort of on break, you're going to have dinner on your own, and you go into Cafe Dolce, any couple of favorite go-to pairings for food and beer for what you enjoy?
Yeah, a really interesting pairing is any sort of salad that we have that's got bitter green on it. And our menu changes often, but we usually have something with frisee in it, for instance.
Frisee, arugula would be? Okay.
Yeah. A big sweet beer like a barley wine. And I know that sounds really strange, salad and barley wine, but the sweetness of barley wine or the sweetness of a bigger beer, kind of counterpoint pairing with frisee or a bitter green, is one of my favorite pairings. And it's one that you're never going to read about. It's one that we kind of discovered on accident and is just completely awesome.
Excellent. And I imagine if anyone comes in and looks over your beer menu, they'll find a barley wine. I always look forward to Big Sky Brewing Company's Old Blue Hair barley wine.
Absolutely.
You often have that in bottle and on tap when it's available.
Yep.
But okay, so a salad and barley wine?
Yep.
Excellent choice. What if we're looking for a little more, pardon the pun, but meat in your dinner?
Yeah. Absolutely.
What would you go for?
We have something I haven't mentioned yet, but and I actually brought you a bottle today from our aging cellar. We age a lot of beer in our cellar. Primarily, they tend to be imperial stouts, imperial porters, but we do sort of play around with all different styles of aging because the science of beer aging is rather new, and there's not a lot sort of written about it. So with steaks, and we offer on our menu just an incredible amount of beautiful local beef and lamb. I typically like something like I brought, like an aged imperial stout.
And just to make the beer geeks jealous and friends that are listening that will know this beer, Jared brought in a 2014 Bourbon County brand stout. Very, very big beer, and big I mean that it is nearly 14% alcohol by volume, rich, black, delicious, and I appreciate it. But yes.
Yeah, our pleasure. I like, with those beers specifically, why I like those with grilled meat is that char on the meat. Again, it's kind of similar to that first pairing. When you get that char against the sort of sweetness of that beer, you start having this very magical pairing as well. And so that's one of my favorite things. And
Excellent. Well, I know you have an event coming up. It's a perfect segue here because we were just talking about imperial stouts, but Black Friday at Cafe Dolce, when you guys are open, you are tapping a special beer. Why don't you tell us what that is?
We are, yeah. Going back to our aging, we also age a lot of beers in-house in kegs. So every year we release on this day the prior year's vintage of Deschutes Abyss.
So that is a beautiful beer. It is an imperial stout. They often barrel age that in a variety of barrels, add cocoa nibs sometimes, just a variety of things. And then they blend it together and bottle it, and they offer it once a year. It usually comes out around Thanksgiving, in November. And if you buy it in bottle, I always love that Deschutes puts a best after date, right? So they're almost encouraging you to put it in the cellar and wait on it. So with you guys doing this with your keg, we're talking about prime drinking for Deschutes Abyss. So when you're done shopping early in the morning, get out to Cafe Dolce, have some great food, try the Deschutes Abyss from 2014. My guest today has been Jared Pietzmeyer from Cafe Dolce, beer and wine director. Great guy, and thanks so much for spending some time with us today.
Thanks again, and just want to let the listeners know if they come in on the Wednesday before Thanksgiving and mention this show, we will give them a little sneak preview of the 2014 Deschutes Abyss.
Very kind. Thank you so much, Jared.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us on the Last Best Beer Show this week. Do not forget to attend the new Business and Brews networking social that we have launched. The first one will be December 3rd at Imagination Brewing Company at 6 p.m. The topic will be Philanthropy and Service 101. So we're going to talk about the spirit of service, about volunteering, the best ways to give your time, how to make smart financial contributions to organizations that matter to you. We'll get together for some beer and a presentation and some beer, of course. So stay tuned to that. It is December 3rd at Imagination Brewing Company, and you'll find more details on our Facebook page. So until next week, listeners, thank you very much, and cheers.